So, Paul Sykes, 15 years on from today. Old Sykesy went to the big pub in the sky. I first come across him 10 years ago this year. So it was obviously 5 years after his death. So I never knew him. When I first discovered him, he was long gone. But I've been around enough Wakefield folk in the last 5, 7 years. 7 years since I decided I was going to do a book, 2015. So I've been around enough proper wakey, shaky, wakey, lups at folk. And I have many different opinions of Paul Sykes. It's not all bad, you know. Although some, when they don't like him, they really, really don't like him. So his life was in various different stages, and I've spoke to people at every single stage. So I've spoke to people who knew him when he was that young kid on the Lupset estate. And he was under the strict kind of, when he lived in fear of not just his dad, his mum as well. I spoke to a couple of the Rileys from the Lupset estate, huge family in Wakefield. So they all knew him. And then I spoke to people when he was the adolescent, when he first started joyriding, when he was boxing, when he was twocking cars, when he was going to prison. When I've spoken to people in prison with him, and his name, he was a god. The name Paul Sykes in Northern England, let me assure you, he was absolute royalty. I spoke to, there's a lot of sadness in the story, regardless of whether you knew him when he was at his peak, when you knew him, when you had seen him running up Dewsbury Road, whether you knew him from in prison, when you knew him, he was that kind of crazy old guy, and he was just sat shouting at all the passers-by, and he would call everyone flower, regardless of your sex. Some days he'd be sat there just shouting at the cars, talking to the pigeons. Very, very sad. I've come across them all, victims, figures of authority, police figures. So I've got every aspect of his life and what the bloke was about. Listen, I'm not from Wakefield. That gets shot at me quite a lot. Another thing that gets shot at me, is well, you never met him, so what do you know? Gets shot at me with the Lee Duffy ones as well. But when you look at the books I did, for instance, the first book come out 5 years ago today, on the 10th anniversary of Paul's death. There was 50 people in there, and the second one, I think there was 34. And then the last one, there was predominantly just me all the way through the whole book, apart from one guy, and he was 20 pages. But he was the former top chief of Wakefield Police. So when you look at the people I've spoke with, and even with the Lee Duffy ones for that matter, but I'm talking about Paul Sykes here. So Paul Sykes done Sweet Agony. I done the three. So there's Sweet Agony, Unfinished Agony, Further Agony, Final Agony. Then there was It's Sharks, and then there was Yes, Paul. So there's 6 books in total that Warcry Publishing have got. So in them books, I spoke with two of his sons, his niece, his only sibling, police officers, victims, boxing faces, Charles Bronson, Johnny Nelson, so, you know, people from the Lupset estate. So, listen, yes, I didn't know him. I would have loved to have met him. You know, there's nobody on this planet I've ever found who enthralls me as much as that character there. Yeah. Oh, you know. I probably would. I would have been starstruck if I'd have met him. And I don't say that lightly, because I meet a lot of people. I've met a lot of footballers and boxers and, you know, loads of people over the last couple of years, members of the Cray firm, and you know, I realise that a lot of people are actually arseholes. But I would have loved to have met him. I would have loved to have just sat and watched him and studied his body language and his behaviour, and, you know, research, studied his psychology. But I didn't meet him. But anyway, all these people did. And for good or bad, and there was a lot in both, they all had different opinions of him. And, you know, obviously that's what makes the books, I suppose, so successful, because all three were Amazon bestsellers, and have sold in huge numbers. But how do you remember Paul Sykes? You know, I spoke to a journalist today who I'm going to be doing a podcast with tomorrow, I think, and so he actually remembers going to the Wakefield Theatre and watching him fight Neil Malpass like 42 years ago. You know, yeah, you know, is there bad memories? Have you got good memories? You know, there's regardless of what people's emotions are with Paul Sykes, what I've found, whether people say, oh, I hated that bastard, or he was all right, you know, the one thing that is always in the good, the bad, and the ugly is there was humour. You know, I've spoke to a lot of people now over the years, and these are all different people, and I've spoke to about 5 or 6 different people over the last 7 years, and they've all said to me, I only ever met Paul Sykes once. They said he was asleep on the floor and he shouted, "Oi, kid, come here." So he's walked over to and met him. This like 13, 14-year-old at the time. And Sykes been drunk and asleep on the floor, and he's went, "Oi, get your fucking hands out your pockets." And yeah, I spoke to a couple of people and they've said, you know, I always used to hear him sing that song, "Rolling, rolling, rolling, raw hag," you know that. A couple of different people. There's another song he used to sing, "I am the landsman of this county." Yeah, anyway. So, yeah, I'm just kind of curious. Listen, he's been gone now 15 years. And, listen, you know, to say people in Wakefield were upset about me for doing the books. I've said it in previous book videos before I get it, because the ghost of Paul Sykes was gone and forgot about. And then I come along and I kicked the hornet's nest, basically. And, you know, a lot of people in Wakefield would have rather have forgot about him. But obviously the people know the film and the documentary is going to happen this year. I can't say who's going to be playing Sykes yet. But when it's public knowledge, and the band who's doing the soundtrack, people will just be like, wow. So Paul Sykes is going to put Wakefield on the map once again. You know, once he did it for good reasons with his boxing. And once he did it for the negative look, which, you know, the documentary and the years in prison and all this. But, you know, the film and the documentary is going to happen, and the limelight is going to come on Wakefield from Paul Sykes 15 years on. You know, I done that book 5 years ago today, released it, and I didn't even know if it was any good. I didn't know whether I'd be laughed at. You know, one of the things that Roger Greenwood, who was the maker of Paul Sykes, when I met him in their hotel in Harrogate, which incidentally is where Paul Sykes used to meet him for the making of Paul Sykes at Large back in the late 80s. And one of the first things he said to me when I said, look, I'm going to do this and I'm going to interview all these people and I'm going to do these books and all that, and he just kind of laughed and he went, yeah, but you're not a writer, are you? And he basically got back in touch with me and he went, thanks, but no thanks. I wish you all the success in the world, but he just thought, some little knob who is full of shit and he's talking a good game, but, you know, I wasn't a writer. I'd never done a book. I left school with not one exam to my name. Obviously, I've had to go back, study a bit of English and all that, but I done that years ago. But with the Paul Sykes projects, it was, you know, obviously they've took off and they're going to become huge and the films have been signed and all this kind of thing. But it was very much a labour of love. I would have done them for free. You know, it was just, I would have done them books. And as I said, I wasn't even sure whether they'd have sold or whether they'd sold 5 or 7 or 20 or, you know, it was like, I could have been laughed at, but I just had such a bee in my bonnet about Sykesy that I thought, you know what, hold my beer. I've read Sweet Agony. I've watched Paul Sykes at Large. I walk into the story. I meet all the characters. You know, I've met one of his 3 wives. I spoke to a lot of people. And they said, look, we understand why you're doing it, but it's not for us. You know, your Ronnie Trelfalls, your David Dunfords, your Delroy Showers, John Spenceley's, Paul's sister, his sons, Kenny the Tailor, all these kind of things. So, yeah, his carer, yeah, just lots of different things. And the one thing's for sure, if they met Paul Sykes, or even so much he was in his company for 10 minutes, then they had a story about him, whether it was good, bad. Yeah, you know, they had a story that they could tell. And 99 times out of 100, it was very funny. So, yeah, listen, I'm not from Wakefield. I get it. It gets shot at me quite a lot. But I just wondered what are people's opinions on it. You know, there's a lot of people out there who were grossly intrigued as I was years ago. You know, so many comments over the years, so many people from all kinds of Britain, parts of Great Britain, message me. I'm in Wakefield, where's so-and-so, where was his house, where did he do that talk? Very much with the Lee Duffy one as well. I was talking to a guy from Weston-super-Mare the other day who said he's driving up 5 hours just to walk around South Bank. And that happens a lot with Paul Sykes. And yeah, oh, honestly, one guy came over from Norway to do the Ghost of Paul Sykes and film it in that workman's club where he's doing that talk and he's saying, Ash, you can't help smoking. And you can see the fire hose at the back, and yeah, it's crazy. But yeah, I just wondered your thoughts on Paul Sykes. Listen, it's got me. If I never had done the first book, I mean, when I done that first book, I was like, well, what do we do now? And then I done a second book, and yeah, and then, you know, 20 odd books on, I've now got I'm a professional writer. But that wouldn't have happened. You know, that wouldn't have happened without that guy there. You know, nothing completely gripped me like Paul Sykes at Large. Nothing I've ever watched in my entire life. I spoke to the boxer last night, Gary Sykes, They're his gloves, actually. A lot of people always ask me to say, what are them gloves? So they were Gary Sykes' gloves when he fought Gary Buckland and he lost his British title. So I spoke to Gary Sykes last night, quite late on. Quite well known years ago, British champion, prize fighter and all this. And texted me about 1:30 in the morning. I'm watching Paul Sykes at large. Do you know what? On the subject, I'm going to watch it tonight. You know, I've watched that over 100 times. Oh, easily, absolutely. And I never get sick of it. It never gets old. You know, it's the only name I'm ever allowed to call my wife when I'm just walking about and I go, oh, I love you, Kath. What are these lights doing on, Kath? I told you we started daily right in prison. Or, you know, I'll often say to my 14-year-old son, you need a proper 16-year-old dad. And, you know what I mean? It's just, that's been part of my life for the last 10 years. I watched Paul Sykes 10 years ago in June this year. And I was just like, what the fuck have I just watched? And obviously I've got a little bit of a boxing background as an amateur when I was a kid. So I've always been massively interested in boxers and true crime. I've read all the books and, you know, I mean, I counted a couple of years back. There was 63 books on the Cray twins. This was about 5 years ago. And I'd read, or I had 56 of them. I think there's a few more now. So I've read everything. I've always studied these kind of characters. And when I come across Paul Sykes, I was just like, whoa. I thought he wasn't real. I thought he was like some kind of Keith Lemon character. And I spent 3 years obsessing and talking to authors and saying, why don't you write a book about Paul Sykes? I'll buy it. And then this was 2012, and then 2015, I just thought, do you know what? Can't be fucking that hard, can it? All I've got to do is buy a dictaphone, go and meet all these different people. A monkey could do it, can't be that hard. And cut a long story short, 20 books on. That was my first one. I released 5 years ago today. So I've got 20 out, and I've got another 2 out, yet to be out. Hartlepool, Born and Bred, Police Officers, and I'm halfway through Jack the Ripper. So I've got like 5 years on and 22 and a half books later. But that was all purely down to not 99%, 100% Paul Sykes. That's how much that guy influenced my life. Yeah, you know, and as I said, I walked into the story, walked into Sweet Agony, walked into Paul Sykes at large, and just, you know, here we are now, many years later, and now it's going to be over shortly to. I nearly said the actor's name there. So Vaughan Civil, who is the film actor for Western Edge Pictures. So he made Oscar Pistorius documentary. He made the Joe Calzaghe documentary. He's done a British horror film called Revenge. So it's over to Vaughan, who is obsessed. I spoke to him a couple of years back. Spoke to his receptionist and his business partners over the years. But it's obviously War Cry Publishing, speak to them more. And I spoke to the guy who's going to be playing Paul Sykes. I sent him the books, 4 years ago, 5 years ago maybe, 4 years ago I think. And he was in theatre, and he said, Jamie, I'm working about 12, 14 hour days. But he said, I have an hour before I go to sleep, and he started his Yorkshire accent, and you know what? Let me tell you, put a tash on this guy who's about 42 now, 6'4". He knows he needs to put weight on him, the boxing training, which I've told you in the past. But put a moustache on him and comb his hair sideways, because he's dark anyway, and it's like looking at Paul Sykes, because the film starts in 1989, which is when Paul Sykes was 43. This guy's about 42 now, probably will be about 43 when I'm filming. And yeah, you know, I just wanted to do a little chat today just on the anniversary of Sykesy. But now it's going to be over to, I need to think of the film director, because I always get the actor. And so now it's over to Vaughan Civil. And he's going to be doing the film and the documentary. And then, you know, I think he'll be a household name, like all the kind of main British crime names, like the Cray twins and Charles Bronson and that guy there, Roy Shaw, whose book I did as well. Yeah, you know, there's all kind of names in Lenny McLean. They're all far more known. You know, a lot of people ultimately haven't discovered the Paul Sykes story yet. Yes, they're familiar with some lunatic talking about punching sharks in the ear, but they don't quite know the full story. Well, I walked into the story and I was obsessed, and I done all the research for the film directors. So that's why the Sweet Agony, Unfinished, Further and Final. So the script has been written by Vaughan Civil and Leo Bill, and the script has been merged from them books. But yeah, you know, I'm an addict. So whether I was doing stupid things years ago when I was young with drugs and all that kind of thing, you know, whether I'm an addict. I'll get addicted to Blue Smarties. So everything I do, I kick the ass out of. Whether it be football or boxing or, you know, drinking. And so I was an addict with Paul Sykes, and I left that story no stone unturned. Very much like the Lee Duffy story, which I've done 3 books and 2 documentaries. That's done. I mean, and Sykes from me is done as well. You know, there's nobody I find greater to. There's nobody I find more unique. You know, what a charismatic, flamboyant, deep, interesting character that guy was. The national press, the Daily Star, have put him in the press recently, about a month or 2 ago. That's because they're aware of the film. They're aware of certain things I can't announce yet. But listen, Paul Sykes, he's going to be big news this year. But first and foremost, I just want to pay my respects. I've been to his grave a couple of times. And as I said, listen, I never met him, never had any connection with him. I've met a lot of people who, I mean, I've been inside prison to visit his son, and had his only sibling come and stay with me, had his niece come and stay with me, been to stay with his wife a few times. But I don't have any link to the story other than I was a fat nosy bastard who just was wow, I'm hold my pint, hold my jacket here, and obviously delivered books. But I owe that man everything. So yeah, you know, 15 years on, rest in peace, Paul Sykes. You know, people are going to have a lot of different emotions regarding what I've just said, because they knew him, I didn't. Listen, as I said in videos in the past before, would I have found him interesting? If I'd have been in Wakefield and I'd have been on the end of some of the things he did, would I have liked him? Probably not. But would I have found him interesting? Absolutely. Yeah, I'd have, you know, there'd have been a good chance I would have been scared, but I'd have been stood down the bottom of the road staring at him, regardless of what stage of his life. And there was many stages of the life of Paul Sykes. You know, you've seen that picture there. in the back when he, I mean, even, well, there's one there. You can see it, can you? Yeah. You know, but there's a lot much sadder, extremely, can't find the words to say how bad that guy's ending was. And if he'd done any wrong in life, believe me, that guy was paid back 1,000 times. You know, I spoke with the actor who was going to play him, and he said the thing that the most interesting thing about playing the role of Paul Sykes, the exact words he said to me was, the social history, the social karma of it, the social justice, that was his exact words, because obviously he was this guy, went around his life doing, you know, lived by his own rules, and everyone had to, you know, to do what he said. And he wasn't blessed with patience, and obviously, you know, he resorted to violence at the flick of a hat. But yeah, you know, the ending that guy got, my opinion personally is no human being deserves to be pissed on and egg smashed on, and the young teenagers setting him on fire with lighter fluid, and beating him up in the gangs, and then going to school the next day and saying, "Oh, I just beat Paul Sykes up there," because he was a name. You know, they didn't really. They just beat up a frail old man who used to be Paul Sykes. And that's the film. It's going to take one extremely talented actor, which he is. And when the name comes out and you've seen him in all the big things, the BBC and the ITV, they'll be like, wow. He's actually a bit of a heartthrob as well. But Paul Sykes wasn't actually a bad-looking man in his prime. But that's what the actor said to me. He said, I'm looking forward to playing it. And he was always, you know, practice his Yorkshire accent. Vaughan Civil's receptionist said to me, he's obsessed with Paul Sykes. He just walks around and says his one-liners and all that. So there you go. There's a film director who's got the passion and that kind of thing that I had to do it. And I know, you know, I've read the synopsis or the blurb for what the film's going to be about, and I'm really excited, and I'm really proud. And you know, when I released that book five years ago today, I'll never forget. My business partner rang me. So the book was released in the March, and we got a call about June, and they said, "Are you Jamie Boyle's publishers? We're interested in getting the rights for the book to make it into a film." Obviously, War Cry Publishing, they have Sweet. They've got them all now. And I said, "Fuck off," you know. And for days I was like, "Oh, shut up." I was just expecting Jeremy Beadle, you know. It was bullshit, you know. And when it was a bestseller, I become like number one on the bestseller thing, and all these proper authors were like bestsellers, and he's me who was winging it. I wasn't even a proper author. So what are the chances of some guy who's come and thought, I'll write a book, and then all of a sudden it gets signed? It's complete fantasy stuff, but it's a true story. I need to go because that's my Parmo at the door. So don't forget to leave your comments. Yeah, Paul Sykes, 15 years on. Rest in peace. Listen, the city of Wakefield will never forget that man's name. Certainly in our lifetime. It's not my fault. Listen, a lot of the things that Paul Sykes did, I wasn't even alive. But yeah, what a character. I've got to swear when I say this. What a fucking character. Unbelievable. Paul Sykes, 15 years on. How do you remember him? So leave your comments below. And if anyone's got any questions, keep them civil, keep them amicable. yeah, I haven't got time to, I won't even engage, you'll just be blocked. So, but I'm approachable, and anything that you would like to know, give me a shout. Don't forget to click and subscribe. God bless. Thank you for all your interest and support in this channel. Always look on the bright side of life. That was Paul Sykes' motto. And when you look at his grave, that's when he had it. Do you know, I was thinking the other day, just one last thing, is obviously I've studied a few characters. Viv Graham, on his grave, simply the best. Lee Duffy, I saw the crescent, he saw the whole of the moon. And Paul Sykes, always look on the bright side of life. So that's like three, like, infamous, well-known villains, if you like, or kind of well-known hard men. And they've got song lyrics on the bottom. But yeah, Paul Sykes, 15 years on. What a character.